Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of From the District with State Senator Suzanne Weber. Senator, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It was a great Palm Sunday Mass this morning.
Oh, yes, us too.
Yeah, it was nicely decorated and very meaningful. And I got to be the narrator for the Passion this morning.
Very nice.
And so that makes it all the more meaningful when, you can read it out loud rather than just following along with everyone.
Yes, and it's a big week for those who are Christians and those who are Jewish. It's a big week. So
yes, and I'm going to be giving the invocation on Wednesday in the
that's
Capitol.
right.
In the
Better
Senate.
write that down. Because you wanted me to help you with that.
Yes, and it's also, the beginning of Passover.
Yes. Yes, it is. So big week for those who are of those two faiths. So blessed Passover, happy Easter to all those who celebrate.
Yes.
I know the legislature tends to wind down a little bit because we do have a number of Jewish legislators. So around Passover, things get a little quiet.
Right.
And they pick back up after Easter.
Right.
So if you don't hear from us Wednesday or Thursday, that might be why.
Well,
and I think we are still probably planning on doing one of these next week. But if for some reason you don't get it from the district, I promise it'll be twice as long the week after.
Right. And please give us the grace to be able to celebrate Easter dinner with family.
Yes. Yes. Well, what did you do this week, Senator? It was it's a busy week, but every week's a busy week.
It was a busy week. It was a busy week because we did a lot of preparation for a lot of bills, because at one point there were 35 bills that, were possible to hear in an hour and a half in one committee. And, we didn't get through a scintilla. I mean, it's taking longer than everyone expected to get through these bills. And so it's going to mean that a lot of them aren't going to make it over the deadline, which is the 4th.
Oh, the 5th.
The 5th.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't do that to me.
Okay.
I think it's the 5th. Yeah, it's the 5th. So we have
and
the first.
It also means
first deadline.
It also means that we may not be having committee meetings in some committees this week. And our Education Ways and Means has been changed to a different venue. And so I'm really curious how that's going to occur too.
Right. Well, the first deadline that the legislature had was last month.
Yes.
Had to have a work session scheduled. Had to have a vote scheduled in the first committee. Of course, the issue with that is that everybody and their mother asked for their bill to be scheduled, and so all these bills were scheduled, and just so they could survive through Bloody Friday, when all those bills die. But now that we have another deadline that you just mentioned, the 5th, they have to actually pass out of the first chamber. So a lot of these bills that they may have made it through the last cut, but they're not
going to make it. They're not going to make it.
Right.
But when you've got 4,000 bills approximately to have to deal with in that short amount of time, the life and death is tenuous on any of them.
Right. And I think there's going to be a few of ours that are going to make it, and a few that aren't, and a few that are in committees that are not bound by these deadlines, so they'll continue on until either they pass or they don't pass or the session ends. But a few of them were really we're chewing our nails a little bit, to be perfect.
Oh, you know it. Yes. And there's a public hearing on Monday morning on one of our bills.
Yeah.
Which would really be a good bill for Tillamook County, because it is specifically for Tillamook County.
Right. That's Senate Bill 406. That's going to be able to increase density for housing in Tillamook County. And that's one of those I'm kind of chewing my nails on. Hopefully we'll have a vote on Monday, which is the 3rd. The second reading would be on the 4th, and then it's got to pass the next day on the 5th. So
I know. This week was one of those weeks where we had a lot of bills to be heard on the floor. We had 17 pages of
Right.
bills that needed to go. And I'm sure that the size of the blue pages, what we call them, what the bills to deal with on whatever day is going to be even more lengthy.
Right.
We had the possibility of having sessions at night again. We haven't heard about that for this week, but I'm sure that in the coming weeks we'll be doing that.
Right. We'll get into here in terms of the committees too. We'll get into kind of a lull while the House is starting to send bills over, but they haven't really gotten a lot over. But all the deadline committees for the House, the Senate bills are done, so you kind of have these lulls in between the kind of the funnel period between the two chambers. So wouldn't be surprised if during the normal committee times you add some floor time there to try to loosen up the clog that we have going on.
Well, the interesting thing is, if anyone watches the sessions on OLIS, that we have a lot of legislators who have a lot of opinions to express on bills that are coming forward.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to be doing, right?
They're called remonstrances, and they have been very interesting.
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed them. And great thing, folks, if you're not able to watch these sessions live, you can go through the past days, and you can just write it on the top. It'll say House convenes and Senate convenes or convened, and it'll have a little play signal, and you can just click that play signal next to it, and you can watch the recording of any day of the session. So if you're interested in that, and then you can fast forward, which I always appreciate. Fast forward through the things that you don't necessarily need to watch. So if you're not watching live, that's an option.
And please remember that they're reading bills, but they have and that it's a computer generated voice that is doing it, and they have upped the speed on it.
Yeah, notice that. Yeah, they tried to do that in the House last session. It was a session before, and the House Republicans actually filed a point of order saying it was too fast. And
yes, they did.
They had to vote on that, which.
Right, and the other thing is, right now, because of all of the construction, there are a lot of issues around odors that are probably chemical type odors in the floor chamber. And the other thing is, there's no heat in there. So you sit still and you're going to freeze to death, I tell you.
Right. Yeah, especially with the weather. Clearly, I'm getting 6 more weeks of winter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Groundhog, because it has been cold.
Yes.
And snowy and unpleasant. So, well, one of those bills that you have been talking about that you voted on last, I know was a challenge for you. And that was SB4. Why don't you tell folks a little bit about SB4?
Well, SB4 is what is called the CHIP bill. And it makes it possible for funds to go out up to $200 million to have, because we would have land ready for people who want to come in and manufacture chips to be able to build plants. There were 16 sites that were communicated, and they had to be sewer and water ready, and they had to be within the urban growth boundary. These chip plants take up a lot of space. They use a lot of water. They impact sewers. And the thing that was the most compelling to me is that the amount of land that they take up, because some of them are requiring as much as 500 acres. Well, if you think about the Willamette Valley and the areas that these 16 sites reflect, you're talking about prime farmland.
Right.
And once you put concrete on farmland, you're never getting it back. And then you're causing all kinds of other problems by displacing water or impacting water or polluting water. And all of that needs to be taken into consideration. And that was something that really impacted my decision. We feed the world right here out of the Willamette Valley and out of Oregon with our fish and all of our farm products and our grass seed. That's not something to be taken lightly. The other aspect was, that the governor can step in and have powers over which land can be used for this. And people like Wilsonville, they didn't like that. There are sites in Washington County that would work well for it. And so, there's a site really close to home in North Plains that has about 500 acres, but it's divided up into two segments that could be used for this. There's a site in Scappoose that could be used for this. So, it's a range of areas. The thing is that they need to be close to their distributors because there are about 500 distributors that they depend upon for product and service. And they also need to be able to depend on having an airport close by. And so the Willamette Valley is a perfect location. Well, when you're on Highway 6 and heading into Portland, you look off to your right and you look at Intel and you see the size of the plant that they have there, the impact on the environment. And then there's another issue that's related to this, and that is housing. If we're going to be bringing in maybe 1,000, 1,500 additional employees, we've already got a housing crisis. Where are we going to put these people? We're not building things fast enough.
Right, and I know you struggled with this one quite a bit because it's going to bring in a lot of jobs, and there's a reality of wanting to be building semiconductors here in the United States rather than in China, for example. That creates a national security issue. But one of the difficulties that I think when we were chatting about it was giving the governor authority to bring land into the urban growth boundary unilaterally. And when people are trying to add land to the urban growth boundary, there's usually nuclear war over it. I mean, expanding the urban growth boundary, it has to be environmental impact studies, and there has to be huge amounts of public hearings, and usually there's lawsuits, and it's just back and forth and back and forth. And
you look at McMinnville, it took them 20 years to get theirs resolved.
Right. And reading your vote explanation, which you can read if you go to the SB4, it makes it very clear that it's time really to open up and redo from the ground up our land use system. Because if you've got a developer who has got 500 acres and he wants to be able to just be brought into the urban growth boundary, for example, if he's wanting to take 500 acres or even 100 acres to say, hey, look, this new microchip factory is going in. We need a development for these people to be housed. Is he going to be able to just go to the legislature and have you guys vote to let the governor just bring him in without any process? There was some flaws with the bill, but I think it's also worth mentioning. Sometimes you look at a bill and who is sponsoring it, and you can see that it's going to pass.
Oh, yes.
And this bill was co-sponsored by the House Majority Leader and the Senate Majority Leader and the Senate Minority Leader. It was going to pass. There was no question. Is it going to pass? The question really was, how are you going to vote for it? Vote on it? And you ended up voting no because of your concerns. But I know you did communicate with of elected leaders in the area who were supporting it to make sure that they knew that
that I was going to vote no.
Right.
Yes.
And so
Because
I think
put that to them, especially if they were going to be impacted by this bill. They needed an explanation, rather than of what my thoughts and concerns were.
right. And we spoke to them, and they, I know, were very appreciative and understood where you were coming from. Probably disagreed with your point, but were very thankful and respectful of you and of your thoughts. And they
But
really
like you
appreciate
said,
that.
it was a no-brainer as to whether or not it was going to pass or not. It was going to pass.
Right. Right. So that was one that's already happened. It's done. It is on to the House, and
what people might like to do is to go in and look at that bill and read the testimony that, of people and their opinions. And I read pages of testimony on this in making my decision. And I think it's all very interesting. I think it's a good read.
yeah, it was very interesting, and we had good conversations with people on both sides of this.
Yes.
Again, knowing full well that it was going to pass. The real question is, what were you going to do? How could you use your vote in the best way possible? I think saying no and also saying why you said no was the best way to use your vote, knowing that the cake was baked already. So
right.
Well, that was SB4. If anybody wants to know any more about SB4 or follow it, it's not passed yet. It's in the House. So if you disagree with the senator and you think it should pass, please reach out to your elected representative. If you think it should not pass, or if you think it should be amended, reach out to your elected House member and explain that to them, because that is where it is at now. Unless it's amended, if it's amended, it'll come back to the Senate for concurrence on amendments, but likely you guys aren't going to see it again, and you've moved on. Well, this is kind of a depressing show that we have. We usually talk about some good bills that we like and some bills that we don't like. Unfortunately, a lot of the bills that we like are either dead or they've already gone past because they're gone. Yeah, they're uncontroversial. So now a lot of the stuff that's left, well, they suck. I mean,
there's lots of controversy over a lot of these things.
Yeah. So let's start with Senate Bill 854. And Senate Bill 854 is going to require each school district to develop a plan establishing climate change instructional program for kindergarten through 12th grade, no later than June 1st, 2026. And, when we were looking about this, we talked about this, and it just seems like, don't we have science classes?
This is an aggressive aspirational curriculum goal. That's all I can say. It's just far too overreaching, and it's really going to impact school districts especially. And we do have these. Last June, the school the Department of Education passed a whole new curriculum. But this is expanded, and there's a lot of young people that are very involved in this, and I applaud the initiative that they've taken. However, we need to take into consideration what's already there. We need to take into consideration what establishing this climate change program is going to do. And then we got to look in the bill and see all of the different dates that there are, because there's some things that are, Department of Education has until June of 27 to establish goals. Well, this bill calls for June of 26 to have the curriculum in place. And then they're putting the caveat on it is, if you don't have this done, then there's you could lose funds from the student investment account. And so there is a fiscal penalty to this.
What I think really bothers me about this is that we talked about this. You have science classes and you talk about climatology and you talk about the weather. You talk about all of that stuff in your science classes. What concerns me is that this is going to be so incredibly aggressive that it forces climate change to be talked about in reading, and climate change to be talked about in art, and climate change to be talked about in social science, and climate change to talk about in English. And man,
And here's the other thing:
this is a religion to some people. I think this is important, but this is a religion to some people.
Right. But we have a lot of children in our schools right now that are fragile, dealing with anxiety. And I think that this only promotes more anxiety and more mental health issues for children, to constantly have them being worried about the fact that they're being told that, basically the world's going to end in 12 years or 15 years and they have no future. I think that is irresponsible. And then in talking with some of the educators, I also had a feeling of naivety, because they were saying, well, teachers don't have enough time to teach all of these various things. They're really pushed for time. Well, here you are adding a whole nother time element to what they're already required to do.
That's something that Representative Wright, when you were in the House and you were vice chair of the House Education Committee, that was a mantra that he really hammered home, because you guys had some really good bills about things that were important, that you wanted to make sure that everybody took a half credit of personal finance, and making sure people know how to do their taxes and things like that. And these are great ideas, but Representative Wright said it right. Haha. You can't make teachers do everything.
Right. There's only so many hours in the day. And yes, there is going to be, the bill has come forward to make sure that there is a personal finance element to the curriculum, especially in high school, because they're finding out that somebody should be teaching these kids about credit cards and interest rates and how to get a home loan and how to fill out your FAFSA and what you need for scholarships and how to do it. And it doesn't exist. There are a few school districts that have really taken that on. However, it's not something that's required. And so this would make it required, along with civics.
Right. So I think Senate Bill 854, another thing that just gets me a little bit is this bill is up for a vote on the 4th, which means if it's up for a vote on the 4th, it'll be up for second reading on the 5th, which means you're going to have to, if it's going to be considered, you're going to have to suspend the rules to consider it by the 5th. You'll have to be able to suspend the rules, pull it up for third reading.
Yes.
And it's just,
like I say, I give the creators of this a lot of credit, but I think they were a little naive in expecting too much.
Right. It's just, for me, it's an important topic to cover in science class,
Exactly.
which every kid has to take. He has to take a science class, but to infuse it into every single subject just seems to be overkill.
I agree.
Anyway, so that is up for a vote on the 4th. More to come, I suppose.
More to come.
More to come. And now the next one that we wanted to chat about, forgive me for pulling this up late.
Are you talking about Senate Bill 320?
I am talking about Senate Bill 320, and I apologize. I think I accidentally deleted Senate Bill 320 from my list. I'm a little slow today, so I apologize. Stand by. I'm almost there. Almost there. No, we weren't going to talk about 320 because it's dead.
No.
Remember?
Yeah.
No, 517. We want to talk about Senate Bill 517.
Right.
And this is talking about licensing.
And you know what? 320, I'm bringing this up, is related to 517 in a roundabout way.
Sure. So Senate Bill 320 would have essentially gutted Measure 11. So Measure 11 was passed in 1994, and it had mandatory minimum sentences for
but Measure 11 was voted on by the people.
Right. And I'm very glad that bill didn't even get a hearing. There are plenty of measures that I think should go away. You think should go away, but if they were voted on by the people, it should be the people who have the opportunity to
exactly.
We talk about Measure 110, for example. I think that was a massive mistake. You think it was a massive mistake. You introduced a bill to give people the opportunity to repeal it.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that hasn't gone anywhere yet.
No, there's been another bill that's been introduced that we should, if it goes any farther, we should give people some information on.
Sure. Sure. We'll get there. We're just
We have
halfway through
time.
the
We have
session.
time. We're
Just
not
halfway
even
through the
half
session.
done.
Yeah. Well, Senate Bill 517. So this would make it so that the licensing board, so TSPC, Teacher Standards Practices, could not deny, suspend, or revoke a professional license to someone who is convicted of a crime that had nothing to do with their license.
Right.
And particularly, we're talking about education here. It does not clarify what not having to do with your license means.
Right.
It gives that power to the licensing to the board.
Right.
So the problem here is, what if a man raped an 80-year-old woman? He's not teaching 80-year-old women.
No.
So could he then apply to have a teacher's license? That's unclear.
That is totally unclear in this bill.
It just blows me away that this is
right.
That as we're dealing with crime, that this is a good idea.
This bill expands the privileges of criminals.
Right.
And I know, stable employment is critical for success after prison. However, to what extent do we go? What about victims' rights?
Right. There are jobs that one can do and make a good living that does not require a professional license and does not put one in contact with children.
Right.
So, if you paid your debt to society, great. That's fine. There are many jobs, many jobs that one can do. Right.
Yes.
And I bring this up because this is specifically really aimed at teachers, and it's in the Senate Education Committee right now.
Yes.
So that's really what the aim is. So, not to mention the onus that this is going to put on the board to actually have to make these decisions. And what if they make a decision and they give a license to somebody and they turn around and attack a child? That's going to open them up to massive amounts of liability.
Yes.
It's a terrible bill.
Yes, it is.
And this is another one that's you're gonna have a work session on the 4th. That means they're gonna have to take special attention to it and suspend the rules and bring it up by the 5th, unless it gets referred over to like Ways and Means.
Yes.
Well, that's
and I will tell you that there have been some bills that I have voted out of committee because I voted them to go to Ways and Means because they're going to cost a lot of money. And with the budget report that we had recently, a lot of those things are not going to be considered for funding.
Right. It's important to remember in the policy committees, like the Education Committee, you are talking about what you think the policy should be. It then goes on to Ways and Means, who decides, well, that's nice, but can we pay for it?
Can
we afford it?
Yes.
And if they say no, we can't, then the bill goes nowhere.
Right.
So just because a bill isn't going to pass out of committee, if it has a referral to Ways and Means, things aren't.
You don't know.
They're not looking good right now in terms of money. There's certainly not a shortage of money, but there's not just this plethora that there has been in the last 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Is that safe to say?
It's very safe to say. And we're hit with this every single day. as to,
Right.
and, and even in the committees, we're being told that agencies were told to cut their budgets by 10 to 15%.
Right. And I think it's important to remember as we're talking about capital construction projects too, because you were able to secure a lot of funding for your district in the last couple of years.
Yes.
And I certainly was, it's not in any small amount, in no small amount is it about your dedication and drive to get that money for your district. But the reality is the money was available at that point. There's going to be less money this time around. Right. I know Katie is working really hard on helping you prioritize, as well as Representative Javity and Representative Stout. You guys are working together in a way I think a lot of senators and their representatives aren't doing, trying to get as much for Senate District 16 as you possibly can.
We got kudos, especially for Katie's work on putting together the spreadsheets for all of the capital constructions projects. And I have to tell you that when I was asking for these proposals, I wanted people to focus on infrastructure because, as you heard me say before, we have not focused on keeping up with our infrastructure. And now we want to do massive building projects and we don't have the infrastructure to support it. So you've got to backpedal for how many miles in order to get the ability to build houses.
Right. It's and especially at the coast, we've got, it's less of an issue for your constituents, I think, more in the valley area, but your coastal constituents, one of the reasons that we have so much time building on the coast is that we don't have water and sewer to the places where there is land.
Right.
And that is remarkably expensive for a little Tillamook County or a little Clatsop County. Easier for Washington County. Got to convince Washington County to care a little bit more about their rural constituents, but they have a lot more money, that ability to do some of these projects than Tillamook County. I mean, there's a number of places, even in the city of Tillamook, that you could build. It is in the urban growth boundary. It is zoned properly. You could build, but you do not have any water.
Sewer and the water to it.
Yeah, so that is a massive issue, and that's been the focus of your capital construction since you got to the legislature. For the most part, I think you've got money for the Astoria Library once.
Yes.
But other than that, it has been focused on improving Tillamook's water line, additional wells for Nehalem and for Bay City. Let's see, what else was that? Resilience in Cannon Beach.
Yes.
Things like that. So yeah, that's important to remember as we're looking at capital construction projects.
So I'm sorry I took you away from.
That's okay. That's important to
remember. Discussion.
We only got one more to talk about anyway. And that's 1045. And we've been getting a lot of people asking about this one. You mentioned that a minister stopped you on the side of the road and asked about this. Well, Senate Bill 1045, I can't even encapsulate everything that it does, but it is an attempt by folks in the legislature and I think folks in the executive branch to solidify power around education at the state level as opposed to the local school board level. Is that safe to say?
That's exactly what it is. It basically, one of the school board members said, why am I even on the school board? This will make me totally insignificant. The state is taking over everything.
Well, and I think that's particularly poignant because those guys take
control would be gone.
It used to be that we could never get anybody to run for school board because it took a lot of time. It really, it was such a low profile. If anybody who had any like higher aspirations, they didn't want to do it because that was just, nobody know them. It was just like a boring job, right? I mean,
Right.
it's not. If anybody who's has actually served on a school board, they know it's not a boring job. It was
Not at
never a
all.
boring job, but it just wasn't very glamorous. Lately, for many reasons that we needn't get into, we've had almost every school district, school board position be challenged, because they realize that school districts do matter, school boards do matter, and it seems like the state just hasn't liked some of the decisions that some school boards have made,
Yeah.
and so they just want to make sure that school boards can't do that anymore. And to me, the better decision is to try to convince school board members that they shouldn't do it, not try to say, well, you can't do it anymore. Because at that point, what's even the point? Because you become the school board member, you get harangued and beaten up by the public,
Right.
and say, how did you do this? And the reality is you didn't have a choice. It was taken away from you.
And what this says is it's relating to student academic performance. But that is not the focus of this bill.
Well, that was the
And
original.
it's also got an emergency clause attached to it. And,
Right.
you know,
Well,
that's something that's very contentious.
We should talk about that. People talk about an emergency clause and they say, where's the emergency? Where's the emergency? 90% of the time, there isn't an actual emergency. They do it for two reasons. One, because it takes effect immediately. And two, you can't refer it to the ballot. When it has an emergency clause, it immediately goes into effect. And that's dangerous in and of itself for a policy move, because things have unintended consequences. And usually, when the bill passes, it goes into effect 90 days after sine die. So 90 days after the legislature adjourns. Usually we're talking September. So bill passes in May. We've got 5 months or so to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? But if it goes into effect immediately, it's like, well, you're building the plane while you're flying it. So that in and of itself is dangerous.
The other thing is that this was a relatively simple bill to begin with, just a matter of a few sentences. But it was conceived quite a while ago, and they didn't know exactly what it was going to say. So it's what they call a gut and stuff. They take everything out of it, they make an amendment, and this amendment is 32 pages long.
Right. So those folks who are wanting to refer this to the ballot, you cannot if it passes. You can start an initiative petition and do it yourself. Unfortunately, that requires a lot more signatures, but it does make it substantially more difficult to get it on the ballot for a vote. So Senate Bill 1045, and I should bring this up, so I wanted to bring it up so that we could just see when the vote is.
I think it's Monday or Tuesday, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be one or the other.
Tuesday, I think.
It is Tuesday. Yep, and then again another bill that's going to get pulled up. What is particularly frustrating for me when these rule suspension votes is that bills like the one we were talking about, Senate Bill 406, the one that is your bill, that bill could get pushed to the bottom and not have time to pass because these other bills get pulled up to the top of the calendar. That would be remarkably frustrating, remarkably unfair if that occurs.
So I challenge you to look that up on OLIS, folks, and read it.
Yeah. Senate Bill 1045, you want to take a look at the amendments. It is long. Take a look if you really want to take a look at some
it's going to affect people.
Yeah, two things to look at. Yeah, go to the testimony so you can hear what people are actually saying. And two, look at the summary and look at the -2 amended summary, and you can see what it does. It gives a really, our LPRO, our Legislative Policy Research Office, staff do a great job in analyzing the bill and say, this is what it's going to do. And they usually do it in a couple of paragraphs. So you can't get it all in there, but it gets you a general idea of what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have today. Maybe a little short today, but that's a lot. I mean, even though we didn't talk a lot of bills, but
we've got more to talk about next week.
we do. We do.
But
it's
please
Easter.
remember to have, if we don't get on here next Sunday or next weekend, that to just know that it's Easter and we want you to enjoy the special season also.
And we will have plenty to talk about the week after.
Oh yeah.
What do you have? It's going to be a short week for you, but
Yep.
It looks like you're only going to have committees probably Monday and Tuesday.
Right.
Probably not Wednesday and Thursday. But what else do you have going on?
Well, I have to get Easter baskets ready.
You do. Do I get chocolate?
I'm meeting with lobbyists, of course, because
Yes.
some of them I have standing meetings with to be able to discuss some of these things. I also have meetings with the political analysts, the people who are hired to look at all these things and look for flaws, look for insight, look for information to be able to convey. And so I have meetings with them. I have meetings with some reps that we're talking about what's going on in the House on education and, what's going on in the Senate in education and how these things are coming together and what I should be looking out for coming from the House and what they should be looking out coming from the Senate.
Well, you have, from my experience and my money, you have the most important caucus meeting on Monday for the entire legislature, the Craft Brewers Caucus.
This is their third meeting.
Good. They should have started earlier. So those folks who don't know what that is, it's a group of legislators and staff who go to a different craft brewery around Salem, usually once a month or once every other few weeks, and it's social, it's fun, and this job is for legislators and staff and everybody involved. This is a remarkably stressful time, and it's very easy to hate each other, especially the longer we get. So it's kind of nice to blow off a little steam and realize that even though we despise some of the things the other side is doing, that they are really human beings, and they have things that are important to them, and lives, and kids, and spouses as well. It's kind of nice to be able to do that.
Yes.
It always was for me. I don't get to go to those anymore because I don't go to Salem very often, but it was always one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. Oh, and did I mention to you that I had a call from the governor on Friday morning?
Oh, right. You did have a conversation with the governor. It sounded like she's calling all the senators.
I think that's a great idea for her to do that. We talked about different areas that, we especially need attention to in our area. We talked about good things and bad things. And amazingly enough, she and I have a friend in common. And so we were able to talk about that. And
Right. It's, again, a lot of major differences in many different things, but I do appreciate that she is at least reaching out.
Yes.
May totally ignore what you have to say. We'll just find out, right?
We'll find out.
Trust but verify.
Yes.
But appreciate that she is at least reaching out to senators, and so that she, like I said, she was reaching out to every senator to have conversations about what's important, and that's probably the more effective, the efficient way to do it, because in every Senate district there are 2 House districts. So and ideally every senator is having constant communication with their House members, yours being Representative Javity and Representative Stout. And I know, especially as we mentioned in capital construction projects, you're having pretty regular communications
Right.
that.
And those two are doing a great job. I will tell you that. They
Good.
really are.
That's great to hear. I know it's particularly with Representative Javity, you have a personal connection in that was your seat.
Yes.
So you want to make sure that he succeeds, and because those are your constituents, and they still are, just in a different way.
Well, I'm really pleased. Both of them, Representative Javity is not one bit shy about asking questions that are really pertinent in committee meetings. And,
Mhm.
that's what you need to do if you don't understand.
Right. I will say, like somebody mentioned, and I said, I just asked how he was doing because, you always like to know how folks are doing. And they said, he asks questions and he works hard. And I mean,
Yes.
I can't much ask for much more in a representative than those two things. So,
Right.
well,
So,
Senator, anything else?
no, I wish you a happy Easter.
You as well.
I'm sure your family will be hunting Easter eggs and dressed up in their finest to go to church next Sunday.
Yes. And I will be collecting the dad tax at the end, as is required.
Yes.
10% of all chocolate goes to dad. I assume because income tax rates 10.5% in Oregon that's proper.
Exactly, it's proper.
So, okay, all right. Well, Senator, happy Easter to you. And
Thank
if we
you.
don't get to talk next week, we'll certainly talk the week after.
Perfect.
All right, everyone.
Because we'll have lots of news for you coming up.
Oh,
Right?
sweet Lord, you know it's coming.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, everyone. Blessed
Thank you.
Passover. Happy Easter. And have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time.